My name is Conrad Whitaker, 70 years old. For the past 10 years, every member of my family has written me off just a senile old man, too busy fussing over his rose bushes to matter. What none of them ever suspected is that for 4 decades, I was the person major corporations called the moment millions went missing. Forensic accountant. Numbers weren't something I merely crunched. They were trails I followed. I ran down embezzlers, fraudsters, con artists who believed their cleverness put them beyond reach. I dismantled every last one of them. Then I walked away, said nothing, and sat on a fortune I kept well out of sight. I wanted a son shaped by effort, not entitlement. Clearly that didn't take. It was Thanksgiving Thursday. The air in our dining room should have carried warmth and the smell of roasted turkey. Instead, it reeked of expensive perfume and entitlement. My wife Beatrice had been on her feet for 2 solid days, cooking her signature mac and cheese buttered green beans peach cobbler. 68 years old arthritis eating at her hands, standing at that stove for hours because she loves our son. Dorian had settled himself at the head of the table like a monarch presiding over a kingdom he never built. 40 years old, draped in a $2,800 suit, riding on a credit card I quietly service every month. Beside him sat his wife Lacey, 35, a former model, who hasn't drawn a paycheck since the wedding. Scrolling her phone, barely glancing at the food Beatrice had poured herself into. I caught the sheen of perspiration on Dorian's forehead. I recognized that look. It's what I used to see on CEOs right before everything collapsed. Dad, Mom. He set his fork down. We need to talk about the house. Lacey and I have a crypto investment venture. Guaranteed 300% returns by next quarter, but we need liquidity. Sign over the deed, and I'll triple our family wealth in 6 months. We are not selling the house, Dorian, I said quietly. His hand came down on the table hard. Silverware jumped. Beatrice flinched. You are not listening to me, old man. His voice was a shout now. Sign it over. This house is worth $2 million sitting on dead equity. Lacey didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. God, you two are so useless. You should just die and get out of the way. Beatrice's eyes filled. Lacey, we let you live in the penthouse downtown. We pay for your car. How can you say that? Shut up, Beatrice. You give us crumbs. Dorian shoved back his chair, yanked a document from his jacket, and slapped it onto the table in front of Beatrice. Sign the papers right now, or so help me God. Her hands trembled. She shook her head. No, Dorian. Your father said no. That was the moment the world stopped. Dorian drew his hand back and struck his mother across the face. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Beatrice was knocked from her chair and hit the floor hard. Her glasses flew off and shattered against the baseboard. Silence. Total, suffocating silence. Then Lacey began to clap. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic. Finally, she said, sneering down at my wife on the floor. She needs to learn her place. I sat there for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, the father in me went dark and the forensic hunter woke up. I crossed to Beatrice and crouched beside her. Her lip was split. A red welt was already rising on her cheek. Something inside her had fractured. I rose and faced my son. I didn't see my child. I saw a target. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old brick phone. Dorian laughed. Look at him, Lacey, calling the police on his brick phone. Go ahead, Dad. Chief Grady is my golf buddy. I didn't call the police. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. It rang once. Calloway. I said, voice low and even. Mr. Whitaker. The response came back sharp and immediate. Activate Protocol 0. Hostile targets on site, immediate extraction. Understood, sir. ETA 3 minutes. Dorian smirked. Protocol 0. Thinks he's in a spy movie. He reached into his briefcase and dropped another folder onto the table. That's a competency evaluation signed by Dr. Aldred. It states you and Mom are suffering from advanced dementia. You're a danger to yourselves. Lacey refilled her wine glass. We have power of attorney now, Conrad. Tomorrow morning we're placing you both in a state-run facility. We'll take the house, the accounts, the cars. You're finished. Beatrice sobbed softly. I rested my hand on her shoulder. You really believe you've won, Dorian? I asked. No heat in my voice. None at all. I know I've won. I've got the paperwork. I've got the police chief. You're a frail old man. You're right, I said. I am old. But you overlooked something. You forgot who bankrolled your golf membership with the police chief. You forgot who's covering the bill on that suit you're wearing. And you forgot that I don't need the police to deal with trash. Dorian stepped toward me, fists tight. You want another slap, old man? Then a sound came from outside. Not a siren. A low, heavy rumble of engines, powerful ones. Headlights swept hard across the dining room window. Tires bit into the gravel of our driveway. Not one vehicle. 3. Dorian's eyes shifted to the window. Is that Grady? He's early. He moved to the front door, still carrying himself like a man who had already won. Hand on the knob. Watch this, Lacey, he called over his shoulder. Watch me throw them out of their own house. He pulled the door open. Dorian's smile went rigid. Standing on my porch were 6 men. No police uniforms. Tactical black gear head to foot. On each chest a logo, a silver shield bearing a black wolf. Whitaker Security Solutions. They were enormous, armed, and not one of them was smiling. The man at the front was a giant named Garrett. I had brought him on 10 years ago as a personal favor to a general whose books I'd once audited. Garrett moved into the doorway, and Dorian stumbled back a step without being touched. Dorian's face had gone the color of ash. Who are you? Get out of my house. Garrett didn't look at him. He looked straight past him, directly at me. Mr. Whitaker. He said, his voice like gravel shifting. Protocol 0 is active. What are your orders? Dorian turned around slowly. Eyes on me. Eyes on the men. Back to me. The terror was absolute. Dad. His voice broke. What is this? I walked over to Beatrice and helped her into a chair. I dabbed the blood from her lip with my napkin. Then I turned to face my son. I told you, Dorian, I said, completely calm. I'm not calling the police. I'm calling the people who pay the police. Lacey lurched to her feet. Her wine glass toppled and exploded on the floor. Who are these people, Conrad? Make them leave. You're scaring me. Good, I said. Garrett, secure the premises. Yes, sir. 2 men moved past Dorian as if he were furniture. They covered the back door and the windows. Garrett stepped into the living room. Dorian tried to pull himself back together. This is trespassing. I own this house. I have the medical papers. I am in charge here. Garrett looked at Dorian with pure contempt. He reached out with one hand and seized Dorian by the lapel of his $2,800 suit, hoisting him until only his toes skimmed the floor. Dorian gasped, clawing at Garrett's hand. Mr. Whitaker signs my checks, kid, Garrett growled. And according to the company registry, as of 5 minutes ago, you don't own a thing. Not this house, not that car in the driveway, not even the phone in your pocket. What are you talking about? Dorian choked out. I moved closer. I stood directly in front of my son. Dorian, I said, did you really think I let you run Whitaker Holdings because you were smart? His eyes went wide. Whitaker Holdings was the shell company I had built for him to play CEO. I set that company up to keep you occupied, I told him. Every asset attached to your name, the penthouse, the Range Rover, the expense accounts, all of it is leased through the parent company. Parent company? Dorian wheezed. That's my company, I said quietly. I own all of it. I always have. And as of right now, I am dissolving the subsidiary. I nodded to Garrett. He let go. Dorian dropped to his knees, gulping for air. Lacey rushed over not to help him, but to grab her bag. She started backing toward the door. I'm leaving. This is insane. I'm going to my parents. I looked at her. You can try Lacey, I said, but check your phone first. She pulled it out. Her face drained of color. My cards, she breathed. They're declining. My Uber account is locked. I canceled the supplementary cards, I said. You see, you two forgot the golden rule. Never bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand is the only reason you're not out on the street. Dorian lifted his eyes from the floor. The fear was still there, but now hate had moved in beside it. You cannot do this, he spat. Squatters' rights. We have lived in the penthouse for 5 years. You'll have to evict us. That takes months. I smiled. Not a warm one. Actually, Dorian, I don't need to evict you because you never had a lease. You were guests, and guests can be removed for bad behavior. I turned to Garrett. Get the keys. Garrett extended his open hand. Car keys, house keys. Then he said, Watch. What? Dorian screamed, clutching his left wrist, covering the gold Patek Philippe Nautilus. This is my Rolex. You gave it to me for my birthday. It is company property listed as a promotional asset, I said. Hand it over. Dorian hesitated. Garrett stepped forward and cracked his knuckles. Dorian quickly unclasped the watch and dropped it into Garrett's palm along with his car keys. Lacey hurled her keys across the floor. You are a monster, she screamed. You are enjoying this. I looked over at my wife sitting in her chair, pressing an ice pack to her face. Enjoying it? I asked quietly. No, Lacey. There is no joy in understanding you raised a monster. There is no joy in watching your wife bleed because your son is a greedy coward. This isn't joy. This is cleanup. I turned back to Dorian. You have 30 minutes. I said, checking my watch. And 30 minutes for what? His voice was shaking. To get out of my sight, I said. Not just out of this house, out of my life. If you are still on my property in 31 minutes, Garrett has instructions to treat you as a hostile intruder. Dorian scrambled upright. But where do we go? We have no money. You froze the accounts. There is a homeless shelter on Cermak Road, I said. I believe they're serving turkey tonight. Maybe you'll find some gratitude there. Dorian's eyes turned hard. This isn't over, old man. I have rights. I'll sue you. I'll drag you through every court I can find. I'll tell everyone you're abusive. So go ahead, I said. But before you do, take a look at the corner of the room. I pointed toward the smoke detector on the ceiling. A small red light blinked steadily. I had cameras installed 3 months ago. Dorian, I told him. Money was going missing from the house. I suspected the cleaning lady. Turns out it was you. His face fell. I have footage of you striking your mother. High-definition audio and video both. If you try to sue me, if you try to go to the press, if you so much as breathe in my direction, I hand that footage straight to the district attorney. Assault on an elderly person is a felony. Do you want to go to prison? Dorian? Dorian looked at Lacey. Lacey looked at the door. Let's go, Lacey hissed, grabbing his arm. He's crazy. They ran. Didn't even stop for their coats. They bolted through the front door into the cold November night. I watched them discover the Range Rover wouldn't respond, no keys, no remote. I watched them argue in the driveway. Then I watched them start the long walk down the dark road toward the main highway. Garrett came and stood beside me. "Do you want us to follow them, sir?" "No," I said, pulling the door shut. "Let them walk. It's a long road to the bottom." I went back to Beatrice. She was staring at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. "Conrad," she whispered. "Who are you?" I walked over and kissed her forehead. "Just the gardener, Beatrice," I said softly. "But sometimes you have to pull the weeds to save the flowers." But I knew this was only the opening move. Dorian was desperate. Lacey was vicious. They weren't going to simply disappear. They would find a way to hit back, and I was right. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. "Hello, Dad." Dorian, breathless, something unhinged in his voice. "Think you're clever, don't you?" he spat. "Think you took everything." "I took what was mine," I replied. "You missed something," Dorian said, and his tone dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "You forgot about the safe in the penthouse, the one in the guest bedroom, the one where you keep your old files." He paused. "The files from the 90s, the Panama accounts." My blood went cold. Those files were supposed to have been destroyed 10 years ago. They held sensitive material on clients who were not merely dangerous. They were the kind of men who settled grievances permanently. "I made copies, Dad." Dorian's laugh came through the line like something broken. "Unlock my cards and wire $5 million into my offshore account by midnight, or I email everything to the cartel." He hung up. I stood in the stillness of the dining room. Beatrice was safe for now. But my son had just fired the first shot in a war he didn't understand. He had no idea he was pointing a weapon at a man who used to have threats for breakfast. I looked at Garrett. "Get the car." "Where are we headed, sir?" he asked. "At the penthouse," I said, buttoning my jacket. "And bring the heavy equipment. My son wants to play gangster. I'm going to show him what a real one looks like." The night was just getting started. The wind off the porch was biting, cutting through the thin fabric of Dorian's $2,800 suit. He stood at the driver's side of the matte black Range Rover, yanking uselessly at the door handle. The car sat there dark and unresponsive, a $200,000 paperweight. "Open it!" Dorian slammed his fist against the window, eyes wild. "Give me the remote access, Dad. I am leaving." I stood at the top of the porch steps, hands deep in my pockets. Beside me, Garrett, head of my security team, had his massive arms folded across his chest. He looked like something carved out of night and granite. "No, that isn't your car, Dorian," I said, my voice carrying easily over the wind. "It has my initials on the seats," Dorian yelled. "You gave it to me." I shook my head slowly. "No, son. I let you drive it. There's a difference. That vehicle is registered to Whitaker Holdings, classified as a corporate transport asset. And since you are no longer the CEO of Whitaker Holdings as of 10 minutes ago, you are no longer authorized to operate it." Dorian's face contorted. "You cannot do this. This is theft." "It's asset recovery." Garrett rumbled, already moving down the stairs with a speed that his size had no right to allow. He was on Dorian in a moment, didn't strike him, just closed the distance, until Dorian had no choice but to press himself back against the cold metal of the SUV. "Hand over the fob," Garrett said. Dorian fumbled through his pocket hands, trembling so badly the keys rattled to the gravel. Garrett scooped them up without a blink. "And the watch," Garrett added. Dorian clutched his left wrist, covering the gold Patek Philippe Nautilus. "No, no way. This was a birthday gift. You gave it to me at the yacht club. Everyone was there. It is personal property," I stepped down one stair. I gave it to you at a company retreat, Dorian, I said. I wrote it off as a performance bonus to sidestep gift tax. Technically, it belongs to the shareholders. And since I am the only shareholder, I am revoking the bonus. Dorian looked at me with undisguised hatred. You are a petty old man, petty and bitter. I am a forensic accountant, Dorian, I said. Cold, even. I don't do petty, I do precise. That watch is worth $120,000. You owe the company $4 million in embezzled funds. Consider this a down payment. Garrett extended his hand. Dorian hesitated. Garrett leaned in and murmured something I couldn't catch, but the color drained clean out of Dorian's face. He unclasped the heavy gold band and dropped the watch into Garrett's palm. There. I hope you choke on it. Dorian spat, rubbing his bare wrist. He turned to Lacey, who was shivering in her heels, arms wrapped tight around herself. Come on, babe, he said, scraping together what was left of his dignity. We are getting an Uber. We are going home. We do not need this trash. He pulled out his phone. Lacey looked past him at me. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped forward, the gravel grinding under her designer soles, and leveled a manicured finger at my face. You think you're so clever, Conrad, she hissed. You made a mistake. A serious legal mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Did I? Yes. A smug smile played at her lips. You threw us out of this house fine. But the penthouse downtown on Michigan Avenue, that is our primary residence. We've established tenancy. You cannot simply lock us out. We have rights. I know the law. Try to block us from entering our home and I'll have you arrested for illegal eviction. I will sue you for every cent you have left. I studied her face. The confidence. The arrogance of someone who has never once had to earn a roof over her own head. I laughed. Dry, brief. Shy Lacey, I said, you really should have read the papers you signed when you moved in. What papers? She snapped. The lease. It is a standard lease. Chachitia, it is a corporate housing agreement, I said. More precisely, an executive lodging contract. I paused, then continued slowly, deliberately, so they could absorb the full weight of what was coming. Clause 14b of that agreement states that upon termination of employment for cause specifically for criminal misconduct, the occupant must vacate the premises immediately. Dorian looked up from his phone. Criminal misconduct. Striking your mother is a crime, Dorian, I said. Embezzling company funds is a crime. Lacey's composure flickered. But you have to give us 30 days. Everyone gets 30 days. Not in corporate housing, I said. I glanced at my wrist, the simple Seiko I have worn for 20 years. You have 30 minutes. 30 minutes for what? Dorian demanded. To collect your belongings, I said. My team is already up there. They are boxing your clothes and your personal effects. Anything purchased on company cards stays. Whatever is genuinely yours gets stacked on the curb. After 30 minutes, the locks change, the access codes reset, and building security has both your photos with standing orders to call the police on site. You are bluffing, Dorian shouted. You cannot do all of that in 30 minutes. I drew out my phone, tapped the screen, and turned it to face them. A live security feed from inside the penthouse. On that small screen, they watched men in black uniforms moving with calm efficiency through their living room, placing items into cardboard boxes. Not gently. That is my Hermes bag! Lacey shrieked, grabbing for the phone. That is my cashmere coat. I pulled the phone back. Both were purchased on the corporate Amex. They stay. The boxes on the curb will have your underwear, your toothbrushes, and whatever clothing you actually paid for with your own money, which from my audit amounts to almost nothing. You are a monster, Lacey screamed, lunging at me, fingers curled. You are destroying us. I didn't move. Garrett stepped in front of her, a wall of muscle between us. I didn't destroy you, I said. I simply stopped bankrolling your fantasies. Dorian had gone quiet. His thumbs were flying across his phone screen, completely tuned out from the chaos around him, focused entirely on whatever he was doing. I know what you're doing, Dorian, I said. He didn't look up. I have money, he muttered. A rainy day fund. An offshore account you don't know about. I've been putting it away. $200,000. I'm moving it right now. We'll get a hotel tonight, and tomorrow I'm hiring the best attorney in the city. I watched him. I watched the hope rising in his face. Go ahead, son, I said quietly. Hit transfer. Dorian smirked. Watch me. He pressed the button with a flourish and held the phone up like a man expecting a trophy. It pinged, but not with a confirmation. His smile disappeared. He tapped the screen again. What the hell, he whispered. Another ping louder. He put the phone on speaker without thinking. The bank's automated voice cut through the cold night air. Access denied. This account has been frozen due to suspicious activity reported by the primary guarantor. Please contact the fraud department immediately. Dorian stared at the phone as if it had just spoken in a foreign language. Primary guarantor, he said, barely audible. But I opened this account. It is in my name. I stepped closer, close enough for him to see the absence of mercy in my eyes. You opened it when you were 19, Dorian. You had no credit history. I co-signed. I have been the guarantor on every account you have ever held. Did you honestly think I'd forgotten? You froze it, he said, his voice breaking apart. That is my money. I earned it. You stole it, I said. That money came from vendor kickbacks you arranged 3 years ago. I tracked every single cent. That is not a rainy day fund, that is evidence. And I have already turned it over to the bank's fraud division. Dorian's phone slipped from his hand. It hit the gravel face first. Screen cracked. He sank to his knees, not in prayer, but in total collapse. I have nothing, he choked. No house, no car, no money. Lacey stared at him. The full reality was descending on her now. The life she had married into, the safety net she had assumed was indestructible, gone, evaporated, like it had never existed. She looked at Dorian on the ground, sobbing like a child. Then she looked at me, standing straight and unmoved. She let out a scream that sounded barely human. Pure, raw entitlement hitting a wall. She came at me with her fingers hooked into claws, going for my eyes. You old devil, she screamed. I will kill you. She didn't get close. Garrett caught her wrist in midair and twisted her arm behind her back, not enough to break anything, but enough to freeze her completely. Lacey howled, kicking at his shins. Let me go. Garrett looked at me. Permission to remove the trash, sir. I looked at my daughter-in-law. Mascara tracking down her face. Features twisted into something ugly and mean. Permission granted, I said. Garrett walked her firmly down the driveway. She was cursing, dragging her heels, utterly powerless against him. He released her at the street, and she stumbled forward onto the asphalt. Dorian looked up at me from the ground, tears streaming. Dad, please, he begged. Where am I supposed to go? I looked down at him. I felt something stir in my chest, a faint echo of the man who taught that boy to ride a bike. But then my eyes went to the window where my wife sat with a bruised and swollen face, and that echo went silent. You figure it out, Dorian, I said. You're a smart boy. Or at least that's what you've always told me. I turned away. I climbed the steps back to my porch. Dad, wait! His voice cracked. Dad, please. I opened the front door. Warmth spilled out from inside. Goodbye, Dorian, I said. I closed the door and threw the deadbolt. The heavy lock slid home with a sound like a gavel striking wood. I stood in the hallway and listened, outside the wind. Lacey screaming at Dorian, Dorian sobbing, and then slowly the sound of footsteps swallowed by the dark. I walked into the living room. Beatrice was waiting for me, watching me with sad, worn eyes. "Is it done?" she asked. I settled beside her and took her hand. "Part 1 is done," I said. "They are gone. They have nothing." Beatrice let out a long, shaky breath. "But they will be back, Conrad," she said. "You know they will. They are desperate now." "I know," I said. I pulled out my phone. "One more call to make tonight." "Who are you calling?" Beatrice asked. "The hotel," I said. "Which hotel?" "The one downtown. The one Dorian and Lacey are going to try to check into once they figure out they have nowhere else to turn." "But you froze their cards," Beatrice said. "They cannot pay." "They will try to use my name," I said, already dialing. "They will try to run a bill on the family reputation. I need to make sure the manager understands that the Whitaker name is closed for business." I put the phone to my ear. "Hello, this is Conrad Whitaker. Connect me to security. We have a situation." The night was far from over. My son and his wife were down, but they weren't finished. A cornered animal is the most dangerous thing in the world. I knew Dorian. I knew his pride. He would look for a way to wound me, a crack to push through. What he did not yet understand was that I had been preparing for this war longer than he had been alive. You think you know desperation until you watch a man discover that his entire life is a fabrication. Dorian was standing in the foyer chest, heaving eyes darting around like a trapped animal. The frozen accounts had broken something in him, and that made him lethal. He reached behind his back. Beatrice screamed, "No, Dorian, do not do it!" I didn't move, didn't flinch. I watched my son pull a Beretta M9 from his waistband. Matte black. I knew that weapon. I had paid for the permit, paid for the gun, paid for the shooting lessons he never once attended. He leveled the barrel at my chest. His hand was shaking so badly the sights were bouncing all across my shirt. "Give me the codes, old man," Dorian screamed. "Unlock the accounts, wire the money. Do it now, or I swear to God I will put a bullet in you." Lacey was in the corner with her phone, eyes wide but calculating. She wasn't stopping him. She was watching to see who would win. "Put the gun down, Grin," I said, dropping my voice an octave. "You have never fired a weapon in anger. You will miss or you will hit your mother by accident. Shut up." Dorian stepped closer. "I am not playing. I want $5 million. Transfer it." Garrett, my head of security, was standing 6 feet to Dorian's left. He hadn't drawn his weapon. He didn't need to. He was watching me, waiting for the signal. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I used to carry on my shoulders, and I understood that boy was gone. The person holding that gun was a stranger. I nodded once. Garrett moved. If you blinked, you missed it. He stepped in and knocked the barrel sideways. The shot discharged a sharp crack, and the bullet buried itself in the ceiling plaster. Beatrice shrieked and ducked, covering her head. Before Dorian could fire again, Garrett had his wrist. There was a sickening crunch, the sound of small bones giving way under overwhelming force. Dorian screamed and dropped the gun. Garrett wasn't done. A kick to the knee, and Dorian went down hard. Then Garrett retrieved the Beretta M9. He looked at the weapon with contempt. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber. Then, in a demonstration of raw strength that made the room go quiet, gripped the slide and frame and twisted. Metal groaned. The frame cracked. He dismantled that gun with his bare hands and let the pieces fall next to Dorian's sobbing face. "Asset neutralized," Garrett said, stepping back. Dorian was curled on the floor, clutching his broken wrist. "My wrist!" he wailed. "You broke my wrist." I stood over him. "You drew a weapon on your father," I said. "Be grateful Garrett didn't break your neck." But the fight wasn't over. It was just moving to a different front. I turned to find Lacey. She wasn't tending to her husband, wasn't checking his wrist. She was positioned by the window phone out, the little red light glowing. She was live streaming. "Help us, please help us." Her voice was cracking beautifully on cue, tears running in perfect rivulets. "We are at the Whitaker estate. My father-in-law has lost his mind. He has hired men. They just broke my husband's arm. They have guns. They are going to kill us because I am white. Please, somebody call the police." I watched her build the story. She was playing the victim with surgical precision, weaponizing her tears, weaponizing race, weaponizing the camera. The viewer count on her screen was climbing. 200, 500, 1,000. Comments cascaded up the feed. "Call 911. Get out of there. That old man is insane." She swung the lens toward me. "Look at him," she sobbed. "He is just standing there watching his son bleed. He is a monster." I didn't turn away. I looked straight into the camera. "Lacey, stop this," Beatrice pleaded from her chair. "Tell them the truth. Tell them Dorian had a gun." Lacey ignored her. She tightened the narrative. "He hit his wife too," she said, panning the camera to Beatrice's bruised face. "Look at her. He beat her. And now he is beating us. We only came for Thanksgiving dinner and he just snapped." In the distance, sirens. Lacey's mouth curled behind the phone. A small, vicious smile. "Did you hear that, Conrad?" She murmured away from the microphone. "That is the cavalry. Chief Grady is coming and he despises you. He has always hated how uppity you are." She turned back to her audience. "The police are here, thank God. Please pray for us." Blue and red strobed through the front windows, washing the walls in chaotic light. Tires screamed on the driveway. Doors slammed. "This is the police, open up." Chief Grady's voice. Lacey sprinted to the door and threw it wide. "Chief, help us." She flung herself at him. "He has mercenaries. He broke Dorian's arm." Chief Grady came through the door like a man who had already made up his mind. Big man, red face, a long history of looking the other way at the right price. Dorian had been buying him steak dinners for 3 years. Grady's hand was already on his holster. 2 deputies followed behind him with shotguns raised. "Everybody freeze!" Grady bellowed. He swept the room. "Garrett, Dorian on the floor, me." "Get on the ground!" he yelled at me. "Conrad Whitaker on your knees, now!" I didn't move. "Get down!" Grady roared, drawing his weapon and leveling it at my head. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault and domestic battery." Garrett tensed. I raised a hand to hold him off. "Titaima, Chief Grady." I said, steady and unhurried. "Before you make a mistake that ends your career, I suggest you look at the television." "What are you talking about?" Grady spat. "Cuff him, boys!" The deputies started toward me. "Wait," I said. Not loud, but the word landed with weight. I picked up the remote from the sideboard and aimed it at the 75-inch screen mounted above the fireplace. I pressed play. The screen came to life. High definition, black and white. The dining room 10 minutes ago. Dorian screaming. Dorian striking Beatrice. Beatrice going down. Lacey clapping. Dorian pulling the Beretta M9. Grady went still. The deputy stopped halfway across the room. Nobody spoke. We all watched Dorian aim the gun at his father's chest. We watched Garrett take it away. I paused on the frame where Dorian had the barrel pointed directly at my heart. I turned to Grady. "Self-defense, Chief," I said. "Clear cut." Stand your ground. Castle doctrine. Take your pick. Grady lowered his weapon a fraction. He looked at Dorian moaning on the floor. He looked at Lacey, whose face had gone pale. Her phone was still in her hand, but the stream had gone quiet. But she said... Grady started pointing toward Lacey. She said you beat your wife. I fast-forwarded the footage. It showed Dorian hitting his mother. Grady's face went a deep shade of purple. He understood now. He'd been positioned to arrest the victim on a fabricated story. But he was stubborn. He was Dorian's man. He wasn't ready to fold. This is still excessive force, he muttered, hunting for an exit. You brought in outside contractors. That is a private military contractor that is illegal. I sighed. I reached into my pocket. The deputies flinched. I pulled out my phone. I am not calling my lawyer Grady, I said. I am calling your boss. Who? Grady asked. The governor, I said. I dialed. I put it on speaker. 2 rings. Conrad, a voice boomed through the line. Governor Colfax. I had helped him expose a tax fraud operation inside his opponent's campaign 4 years back. That favor bought him his governorship, and he knew it. Hi, happy Thanksgiving, old friend. Why are you calling at this hour, Governor? I said. I have a situation. Chief Grady from the local precinct is standing in my living room. He is threatening to arrest me because my son pulled a gun on me and I defended myself. Silence fell over the line. A heavy, dangerous silence. Put him on, the governor said. The warmth had drained entirely from his voice. What remained was iron. I extended the phone toward Grady. His hand trembled as he took it. Governor, he managed, voice cracking. Grady. The governor's voice rolled through the room like a thunderclap. If you lay one finger on Conrad Whitaker, I will have your badge, your pension, and your freedom before the sun comes up. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, Grady whispered. Conrad is the reason this state is not underwater. The governor pressed on. The man is a patriot. If he says it was self-defense, then it was self-defense. Now clean up your mess and clear out. Grady handed the phone back to me as though it had burned him. He turned to his deputies. Put those cuffs away, Grady barked. He dropped his eyes to Dorian. Get up, Dorian. His voice was flat and cold. Dorian looked up, bewildered. Grady, you have to help me. He broke my wrist. You drew a weapon on a homeowner, Grady said, reciting the statute like a shield for his own back. You committed assault. You filed a false police report. Lacey tried to push forward, but chiefed the live stream. Shut up, Grady cut her off. You lied to an officer. That is obstruction. He jabbed a finger toward the door. Both of you out, before I charge you with attempted murder. Dorian clawed his way up from the floor, cradling his broken wrist. Lacey glanced around the room, feeling the audience shift against her, feeling her shield dissolve. But we have nowhere to go, Lacey cried out. That is not a police matter, Grady said. Get off the property, now. Dorian stumbled toward the door, leaning into Lacey for support. At the threshold, he turned and looked back at me one final time. Every trace of arrogance had bled out of him. Only fear remained. I stood and watched them go. My house was wrecked. My wife was hurt. My son had become a criminal. But I was still on my feet. Grady touched the brim of his hat. He looked like a man who wanted to disappear. Happy Thanksgiving, Mr. Whitaker, Grady mumbled. Sorry for the disturbance. He rushed his deputies out the door, and the house fell into the silence of the aftermath. I turned to Beatrice. She sat clutching the ice-packed, tears running quietly down her face. I crossed the room and lowered myself beside her. "The live stream," I asked. Garrett glanced at his tablet. "Still up, sir, but the comments have flipped. Someone leaked the security footage you just played. The internet has the full picture now. They are tearing Lacey apart." "Good," I said. But I knew Dorian. I knew his greed like I knew my own heartbeat. He would not stop. He needed money. He needed a victory. And if he could not pry it from me, he would go after the only other person on this earth I truly cared about. My phone buzzed. A text. Not from Dorian, from an automated security alert I had put in place years ago. Unauthorized entry detected. Location guest house. My blood went cold. The guest house. That was where my grandson Eli slept whenever he came to visit. Dorian had not simply left. He had circled back. I looked at Garrett. "They took the boy," I said, rising to my feet. The night had just crossed the line from a battle into a war. And this time I was not aiming for the wrist. The temperature bottomed out at 30 degrees that night. The kind of cold that skips right past the skin and plants itself deep in the bone. I watched the GPS tracker dot crawl slowly along the main avenue on my phone screen. Dorian and Lacey were on foot. They had no other option. Their Uber accounts were suspended. Their cards were frozen. And nobody stops to pick up hitchhikers in $2,800 suits on the highway shoulder. They were hauling 2 Toomey suitcases my security team had pitched onto the curb. I could picture the scene without trying. Lacey was likely shaking inside that thin silk dress, her heels snapping against the pavement with every step. Dorian would be nursing that broken wrist, the pain medication fading, and the full weight of his situation pressing down on him. They stopped beneath a streetlight 3 blocks from the city center. I tapped into the audio feed from Dorian's phone. I had not cut his service yet. I wanted to hear them come apart. "This is your fault!" Lacey shrieked, her voice shredding against the wind. "You said he was senile. You said he was weak. You said we would have the money by dinner." "Shut up, Lacey," Dorian fired back. The pain was raw in his voice. "My wrist is throbbing. I need a doctor." "You need a brain," Lacey spat. "You pulled a gun on him, Dorian. A gun! We are going to jail." "We are not going to jail." Dorian pushed back, but conviction was nowhere in it. "He is my father. He won't press charges. He just wanted to put a scare into us. We need to find a hotel, sleep, regroup. Tomorrow I call my contacts. I fix this." "Your contacts." Lacey let out a laugh, sharp and hollow as breaking glass. "Your contacts are his contacts, you idiot. You do not have friends. You have people who tolerate you because of your last name. And right now, that name is Mud." They kept walking. They were headed toward the Lakeside Grand Hotel, the most expensive property in the city. Of course they were. Creatures of habit do not change their instincts even when they are bleeding out. They could have found a motel. They could have walked into a shelter. But their pride was still standing even when their bank accounts had collapsed. They believed they could charm their way back into luxury. They still thought the world owed them comfort. I turned to Garrett. "Bring the car around. We are going to the Lakeside Grand." We arrived 10 minutes ahead of them. I came in through the service entrance and rode the private elevator up to the executive suite overlooking the lobby. I poured myself a glass of water and settled in front of the security monitors. They pushed through the revolving doors, looking like survivors of a shipwreck dressed in couture. Dorian was pale, sweating, his injured arm pinned against his chest. Lacey looked like she had been dragged backwards through a rainstorm. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Hair snarled and windblown. They made their way to the front desk. The night manager, a young man named Nolan, looked up. He held his professional smile in place, but the confusion behind his eyes was plain. Mr. Whitaker. Nolan said, "We were not expecting you tonight." I need a suite," Dorian said, leaning his weight on the counter. "The presidential. And get a doctor up there immediately. I had an accident." "Of course, sir," Nolan replied, fingers moving over his keyboard. "Do you have a card on file?" "Just use the one on file," Dorian snapped. "I am afraid that card was declined earlier this evening, sir," Nolan said, his tone measured and polite. "The system shows it reported lost or stolen. Do you have another form of payment?" Dorian dug through his pockets with his good hand. He produced a platinum card I had issued him for emergencies. He dropped it on the marble counter. "Use this one and make it fast. My wife is freezing." Nolan took the card and swiped it. A beep. The terminal flashed red. "I am sorry, sir," Nolan said, sliding the card back across the counter. "This one is declined as well. Code 05 refer to issuer." Dorian's face went purple. "Try it again. It is a platinum card. It has no limit." "I have run it twice, sir," Nolan said. "It is dead." Lacey shoved Dorian out of her way. She brought her palm down on the counter. "Do you have any idea who we are?" she shrieked. "This is Dorian Whitaker. His father owns half this city. We stay here every month. Stop playing games and hand us a key, or I will have your job. I want your manager." "I am the night manager, ma'am," Nolan said, his patience wearing visibly thin. "And without a valid form of payment, I cannot check you in. Those are the rules." "To hell with the rules," Dorian shouted. He snatched a vase of flowers off the counter and hurled it. It exploded against the floor water and roses scattering in every direction. "Call the owner. Call him right now. Tell him Dorian Whitaker is here, and if I do not have a room, I will burn this place to the ground." Security began to move. 2 large guards stepped forward from the shadows. "Do not touch me!" Lacey screamed as a guard reached for her arm. "I will sue you. I will sue this entire hotel." I stood up in the executive suite. It was time. I walked out onto the mezzanine balcony and looked down over the lobby below. "You want to speak to the owner, Dorian?" I called out. My voice carried through the high ceilings and across the entire lobby floor. Dorian and Lacey went completely still. They looked up. The moment they saw me up there on the mezzanine looking down at them, the way a judge surveys a courtroom, whatever color remained in their faces vanished. "Dad," Dorian breathed. "You called for the owner," I said, beginning my descent down the grand staircase unhurried. My cane struck each marble step in turn. Click, click, click. "Well, here I am." Lacey's mouth fell open. "What are you talking about?" "You do not own this hotel. The conglomerate owns it." I smiled. "I am the conglomerate, Lacey," I said, reaching the lobby floor. "I bought the controlling stake in this hotel chain 6 years ago. I kept my name off the building because I value my privacy. But let there be no confusion, I own the sheets you sleep on. I own the food you eat. And I own the ground beneath your feet right now." Dorian swept his eyes around the lobby. He watched the staff regard me with quiet deference. The truth of it landed on him. "Dad, please," he whimpered, hunching over his broken wrist. "I am hurt. We have nowhere to go. It is cold. Just give us a room one night." I turned to Nolan, the manager. "Nolan," I said. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker." "These 2 individuals are to be added to the global blacklist." I said, my voice steady and unhurried, carrying to every corner of the lobby. "They are banned from this property and every property in our portfolio worldwide. If they attempt to enter any of our hotels again, contact the police immediately for trespassing." "Yes, sir." Nolan said, already making note of it. Lacey stepped forward. You cannot do that. I am a citizen. I have rights. I turned my gaze to her slowly. Actually, Lacey, I said, I am glad you raised that. I drew a folded document from my jacket pocket. I made a call on the way over here, I said. A friend of mine at the Department of Immigration. It seems there is a small irregularity in your visa status. Lacey went rigid. Her eyes widened. You see, I went on, your spousal visa is contingent on your marriage remaining in good standing and on your husband having the financial means to support you. Since Dorian is currently destitute and under investigation for fraud, and since I am about to file a formal petition to annul the marriage on the grounds of bad faith, your status is about to become very uncertain. You wouldn't, Lacey whispered. I looked toward the security guards. Remove them, I said, and contact immigration. Let them know we have a person of interest on the premises who just made threats of arson. Dorian lunged for my arm. Dad, no, stop. You are going too far. A guard seized Dorian by the collar of his jacket and hauled him back. Dorian howled as the movement jolted his broken wrist. Lacey was retreating toward the doors, shaking her head. No, I am not going back. You cannot send me back. I turned away from them. I walked to the front desk. Nolan. I said, the screaming behind me nothing more than background noise now. Yes, Mr. Whitaker. Send a bill for the broken vase to my office. I said, and have housekeeping take care of this. It smells like desperation in here. I did not turn around as they were pushed out into the cold for the second time that night. I heard the revolving doors spin. I heard sirens rising somewhere in the distance. I took the elevator back up to the suite, sat down, and finished the water I had left behind. My hand carried a slight tremor, not fear, adrenaline. It is a terrible thing to dismantle your own family. But when that family has curdled into something dangerous, it becomes necessary. I checked my phone. Calloway had sent a message. The files are secure. The bank audit is complete. We have enough to put Dorian away for 20 years. I closed my eyes. The street below had gone quiet. But I understood this was only the eye of the storm. Lacey was cornered. Dorian was broken. They would strike out. And when morning came and the wreckage of the night settled in, they would recognize that the only move they had left was the one that could bring down everything. They would reach for the nuclear option. They would try to ruin my name. Let them. I built my name in the mud. A little more dirt would not hurt it. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the doorbell rang. A timid sound this time, nothing like the frantic pounding of the night before. Beatrice was at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea, still trembling faintly, when she raised it to her lips. The bruise on her cheek had deepened overnight to a dark, angry purple. I checked the security monitor. It was Lacey. She was alone. Gone was the designer silk dress from the night before. She had on jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, hair scraped back into a careless bun, not a trace of makeup on her face. She looked like a college student crawling out of a sleepless night. It was a costume. I knew it because I knew Lacey spent 2 hours every morning sculpting her face just to retrieve the mail. Do not answer it, Beatrice murmured. I have to, Beatrice, I said, checking the pistol tucked at the small of my back. If I don't, she will stand out there wailing until the neighbors call the police again. And I am done with the police. I went to the door and opened it. Lacey dropped to her knees the instant the latch gave a theatrical fall, the timing immaculate. She was crying before I could draw a breath. Oh God, Conrad, please help me. She sobbed, clutching at the hem of my trousers. I got away from him. He has lost his mind. Dorian has lost his mind. I looked down at her. I did not extend a hand. I did not offer comfort. I simply watched the performance unfold. "Get up, Lacey," I said. "You are ruining the doormat." She lifted her face, red-eyed and blotched. "You have to believe me, Conrad. It was all him. He made me say those things. He forced me to run the live stream. He told me if I did not help him get the money, he would hurt me. He has a gun, Conrad. You saw the gun." "I saw him pull a gun," I corrected. "I also saw you clap when he struck his mother. I saw you smile when you thought the night was going your way. That did not look like fear, Lacey. That looked like partnership." She shook her head in hard, sharp jerks. I was in shock. I was terrified. "You do not know what he is like behind closed doors. He beats me, Conrad. He has been beating me for years." I leaned into the doorframe and crossed my arms. "That is interesting," I said, "because I have the credit card records going back 5 years. I see thousands spent on spa treatments, facials, and massages. I see nothing charged to urgent care emergency rooms or concealer heavy enough to cover a bruise. When a man is abusive, there is usually a paper trail of pain. With you, there is only a paper trail of pampering." Lacey's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before she buried her face in her hands and wailed louder. "I ran away," she cried. "I left him at that Motel 6 on the highway. He passed out drunk. I took a cab here. I have nowhere else to go. Please, Conrad, not for me, but for the baby." The air left the room. Beatrice appeared in the hallway behind me. She had heard. "What did you say?" Beatrice asked, her voice barely finding sound. Lacey looked past me and locked eyes with my wife. She knew exactly where the soft target was. "I am pregnant, Beatrice." Lacey choked out, one hand moving to her stomach. "I am 10 weeks along. It is a boy. I saw the ultrasound. It is your grandson, the heir to the Whitaker name." I felt Beatrice shift beside me. I felt her resolve beginning to fracture. She looked at Lacey's stomach, then at Lacey's tear-streaked face. The bruise on Beatrice's cheek seemed to pulse, but the hope rising in her eyes was something she could not hide. A grandson. The one thing we had always wanted, the one thing all our money had never been able to buy. "A baby," Beatrice whispered. "Yes," Lacey sobbed. "Please, Mom. Do not let your grandson grow up out on the street. Dorian does not care about him. He said he did not want another mouth to feed. But I want him. I want to be a mother. I want to make this right." Beatrice moved forward and reached out her hand. "Conrad, she is pregnant. We cannot leave a baby out in the cold." I put my arm across Beatrice's path. "She is not coming in, Beatrice," I said. "Conrad." Beatrice pleaded, tears spilling over. "It is a child, an innocent child. If she is telling the truth, we have a duty." I looked at Lacey. She was watching the two of us, eyes tracking back and forth between us, calculating the odds. She felt Beatrice wavering and pressed harder. "I will do anything," Lacey promised. "A prenup, a divorce, full custody, whatever you need. Just open the door. I haven't eaten. The baby hasn't eaten." I held her gaze and said nothing for a moment. I've sat across from men who drained pension funds dry. I've faced down accountants who laundered money for cartels. Spotting a liar is second nature to me. What makes it truly easy is when the documents are already in my hand. "Calloway forwarded me a file first thing this morning," I said evenly. Lacey's eyes flickered. "What file?" "A full medical audit," I said. My hand went into the inner pocket of my cardigan and came out with a slim manila envelope. Thin, yes, but dense with things she never wanted me to know. Here's what you need to understand, Lacey. When my son brought you into this family, I did exactly what any father worth $50 million does. I retained an investigator not to surveil you, just to verify. To confirm you were the person you presented yourself to be. The crying stopped dead. Not a sniffle. Not a catch of breath off like someone had flipped a switch. These records were not obtained through official channels, I said, tapping the envelope against my open palm. Money finds a way, and the records from Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, dated September 12th, 5 years ago, document a very deliberate elective procedure. Lacey rose slowly from her knees and stood upright. She brushed the grit from her jeans. Whatever remained of the victim vanished from her expression. What surfaced instead was the cool calculation of someone who has just watched their bluff get called. You had your tubes tied, Lacey, to protect your figure for a modeling career. You told the physician that children were, and I quote, parasites who ruin your waistline. Beatrice made a sharp sound behind me, her hand pressed over her mouth. You cannot conceive, Lacey, I said, voice flat as concrete. Pregnancy is not possible for you. There is no baby. There is no grandson, just a calculation you made and a story you built around it, hoping it would unlock the penthouse door. Lacey's mouth opened. Nothing emerged. I reached back into the envelope and withdrew a glossy photograph just for the sake of thoroughness. Then I also pulled the surveillance imagery from Crunch Fitness on Whacker Drive. I raised the photo so she could see it clearly. There was Lacey, arms around a man who was unmistakably not Dorian, a personal trainer named Tanner, 25 years old, spray-tanned within an inch of his life. Shot 3 days ago, I said. While Dorian was off pitching his fictional investors, you were in the locker room with Tanner. Does Dorian know his last $5,000 went toward a watch for your gym buddy? From behind me, I heard Beatrice exhale a low, gutted sound. Her footsteps retreated toward the kitchen. She couldn't stay in the same air as this woman. I let the photo drop. It settled face up at Lacey's feet in the dust. You are not a mother, I said. You are not someone's victim. You are a grifter who miscalculated how long the con would last. She stood there looking at her own image on the ground, then raised her eyes to mine. Whatever she had been performing was finished. The weeping, helpless woman erased. What replaced her had teeth. She laughed. Not a real laugh, something brittle and mean. You smug old man, she hissed. You have this whole city wired, don't you? I protect what's mine, I said. You were a liability. She closed the distance between us until I could read every line of rage on her face. The smell coming off her flat vodka motel bathroom soap. You sit up in that house, Lacey said, playing God with everyone's lives, moving us around like pieces on a board. Here's something you should know, Conrad. You are not the only person in this game holding cards. I let one eyebrow rise. Go on. Her eyes went to slits. Well, and Dorian is a talker when he's sleeping. Even more so after a bottle of bourbon. He told me about the 80s. He explained exactly how the foundation was built and what it was really built on. I gave her nothing. Not a twitch. He told me you served federal time, she said softly, the smile widening like a cut. 4 years. Fraud. She let that land, stepping back to watch the damage. Picture the headline, she said. Conrad Whitaker, civic icon, charity champion, beloved patriarch, convicted felon. How long do those board seats last once that gets out? Which of your black tie friends keeps your number saved when they find out you did a stint? I stood there feeling something settle in my chest, an almost eerie stillness. She thought she had detonated something. She was waving around a sparkler. 5 million, she said. Transferred in cash to a Cayman's account. Or every journalist in this city gets the full package. The abuse, the neglect, the mugshot. I will dismantle everything you built piece by piece. I glanced down at my watch. Finished? She blinked. Excuse me. Is the threat complete? I said. Only asking because there's a breakfast I need to get to, and this shirt isn't going to change itself. You think I'm playing? She shouted. So I will level you. Lacey. I said, stepping in close enough that she had to hold her ground. 40 years ago, I was in federal prison. That fact exists in public court records for anyone willing to spend 20 minutes searching. It has never been a secret I kept. But the details, she scoffed. The full picture. Not yours to tell, I said. And if you believe that my own history makes me flinch, you have badly misread who I am. Everything I have, every dollar, every connection, every deed I built, it coming out the other side of that cell. That sentence gave me more than your scheming will ever cost me. I moved one step forward, and she moved one step back off the porch. Ring TMZ, I said. Pitch the Times. Brief every gossip column in the country. But hold on to this one fact before you do. What fact? She shot back, chin up. Saying false things to damage someone is a civil matter, I said. Demanding money under threat of doing it is a felony. And every word you have spoken in the last 3 minutes has been recorded. I touched the small lens hidden in the button of my cardigan. 10 to 15 years, Lacey. And you are not built for prison. Too accustomed to comfort. Too conscious of appearance. And nowhere near disciplined enough to stay quiet when it counts. The blood drained from her face. Her gaze dropped to the button, then came back up. You're lying, she said, barely above a breath. Push me, I said. A long pause. I half expected her to swing, but there was nothing left in her to swing with. Every scheme she had walked in carrying was now ash. The blackmail, the fake pregnancy, the whole performance done. She pivoted and moved down the drive at a clip heels, catching on the pavement, nearly going over once. She never turned around. I stood there until she disappeared at the far end of the block, then stepped back inside and set the lock. Beatrice was at the kitchen table, both hands flat on the surface. The crying had stopped. She looked emptied out. She's gone, I said, pulling out the chair across from her. All of it was a lie, the baby. Her voice had no color in it. Every word I said, she absorbed that. And the prison, she said quietly. You've never once brought it up. We leave it where it belongs, I said. Behind us. It was another life. She'll go talking, Beatrice said, and I could hear the worry threading through it. She'll want to do damage. Then let her, I said. The phone buzzed. Calloway. Mr. Whitaker. His voice was brisk and ready. The press release is drafted and standing by. Ready to push it live on your word. I looked across at my wife, at the bruise still coloring her cheek, at everything Dorian and Lacey had broken trying to take what wasn't theirs. Unsend it, I said. The interview slot still on the schedule, Calloway asked. Leave it, I said. Get the station on the line and confirm I'll be there. Lacey wants to surface the past fine. We'll surface all of it, including who her father actually was. I set the phone down. Beatrice was watching me from across the table. What exactly are you planning? Conrad. I straightened up and smoothed the front of my cardigan. I'm going to own the story before she can twist it, Beatrice. She thinks this is a reputation war. She hasn't stopped to consider that I know where every skeleton in her family is buried, because I'm the one who put them there. Before I made it to the door, the phone rang a second time. Dorian's name on the screen. Something in my gut told me not to ignore it. I answered. "Hello, son." "It's over, Dad," Dorian said. That voice flat, measured. Nothing like the desperate howling of last night. "You stripped the accounts. You took the house. You sent Lacey running. I made the moves I had to make," I said. "Right. And now I'm making mine," Dorian said. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means there is one thing left that you didn't take," he said. "One thing that actually matters to you." My jaw tightened. "I cleared you out completely, Dorian. There is nothing left." What comes next stopped me cold the first time I heard it, because it showed just how far a person will go when they feel cornered and have nothing left to lose. "Before we get there, tell me, if someone you loved turned against you, would you face them head on, or would you move quietly and let the evidence speak for itself?" I have Eli," he said. My heart stopped cold. Eli, my grandson. Dorian's boy from his first marriage. The one untouched, innocent thing in the middle of all this wreckage. Eli lived with his mother in the city. I covered his tuition. I covered their housing. "What have you done, Dorian?" I whispered. "Shatit, I pulled him out of school a little early." Dorian said, his voice almost casual. "Told the staff we had a surprise trip planned. He's with me right now, Dad. We're in a van, moving." "Where?" "That's entirely up to you," Dorian said. "Wire $10 million into a crypto wallet. No banks, nothing traceable, just clean digital currency, and you get him back. You kidnapped your own child." I said, my voice dropping to something raw and dangerous. "I took my son on a road trip," Dorian said, and I could hear the smile. "Unless payment doesn't come through, then it might turn into something else. The road is unpredictable, Dad. Things happen. Do not lay a hand on him, Dorian." I heard my own knuckles whiten around the phone. "10 million, Dorian said, cutting across me. 1 hour. After that, Eli suffers for your stubbornness." The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen with the phone at my side. The floor felt unsteady beneath me. Everything I had built, every dollar, every connection, none of it mattered right now. My grandson was in a vehicle with a man who had already aimed a weapon at his own father. Beatrice read my face the moment she saw it. "Conrad," she breathed. "What happened?" "They have Eli," I said. I did not reach for my phone to dial the police. I did not call the governor. Instead, I crossed to the pantry and moved the heavy shelving unit stocked with canned goods. Behind it sat a steel door fitted with a biometric panel. I pressed my palm flat against the scanner. The lock disengaged with a hiss. What was behind that door was not a panic room. It was a command center, rows of monitor server racks, a wall of equipment I had not powered up since the years I spent tracking cartel finances across Colombia. I settled in front of the main console and entered a command sequence. Beatrice stepped in behind me, her eyes moving across the room. "Conrad, what is all of this?" "I'm pulling up the tracker," I said. "What tracker?" "The one built into the vintage watch I gave Eli for his birthday," I said. I had made him promise never to remove it. A red dot blinked onto the map on the central screen. Southbound, moving at highway speed on the interstate. I reached for a headset. "Calloway, get the cleaners mobilized," I said. "The cleaners," Beatrice repeated, barely audible. "Conrad, those men are problem solvers," I said, pressing a fresh magazine into a tactical pistol. "And right now, we have a serious problem." I fixed my eyes on that red dot. "Hang on, Eli," I said quietly. "Grandpa is on his way, And I am not coming empty-handed. I had watched Lacey move down the driveway, but I was not fooled for a second. She was not walking toward surrender. She was walking toward the nearest Wi-Fi signal. A cornered woman like Lacey Pemberton doesn't make threats she doesn't intend to keep. Her phone was already out before she cleared the end of the block. I could make out the screen's glow catching her face in the low light. She was signing into her accounts, the ones with the thousands of followers she had built using my money. She was going to post the mugshot. She was going to tell the world that Conrad Whitaker, the man behind community centers and scholarship funds, was a federal convict. I turned back to Beatrice. She was standing at the counter, running a dish towel through her hands again and again, unable to stop. "She's going to do it," Beatrice whispered. "Everyone will see." "Well, then they'll see," I said, straightening my jacket. "It's time the full story came out." I walked to where Garrett had the car ready. We bypassed the police station entirely. Our destination was the Channel 7 news studio. Calloway had made the call in advance. The producer there owed me a defamation suit I had once resolved for a fraction of what it was worth 3 years back. By the time we pulled up, Lacey's post had already caught fire. It was spreading fast, breaking the dark history of Conrad Whitaker, felon, fraudster, abuser. She had attached the mugshot from 1983. I looked young in that photograph, frightened and furious in equal measure. My inbox was filling up. People I had spent decades helping were asking if it was real. Every charity board I sat on was lighting up with text messages. The unraveling had started. Lacey believed this was her killing stroke. She thought humiliation would be enough to shut me down. She forgot that shame only has power over someone who is hiding. I have not been hiding. Not for a long time. I walked onto the set. The studio lights hit like a wall. The anchor, Dana Holt, had her tablet open in front of her, Lacey's accusations filling the screen. "Mr. Whitaker," she said carefully, "these are serious claims. Your daughter-in-law states you served 4 years in federal prison for securities fraud. Is any of this accurate?" I looked straight into the camera. I pictured Lacey watching this on a cracked phone screen in some budget motel room somewhere. "Yes," I said. "No hedge, no qualifier." In 1983, I was sentenced to 5 years and served 4 at a minimum security facility in Terre Haute. The studio held its breath. Dana blinked. She had not expected a flat admission. "But Lacey left out the most critical piece of that story," I said, leaning forward. "She left out who I actually went to prison for." I reached into my bag and produced a worn leather binder, the kind that carries the smell of decades. I opened it to a document gone yellow and brittle at the edges. "This is a plea agreement," I said, holding it toward the camera. "My signature is on it. But look at the witness line, you'll find another name there." Dana leaned in. "Arthur Pemberton," she read. "Arthur Pemberton," I confirmed. "Real estate titan, passed away 10 years ago, and Lacey Pemberton's father." Dana's eyes went wide. "Arthur Pemberton was not the visionary people believed him to be," I said. "He was operating a Ponzi scheme that systematically drained the pension accounts of steelworkers in this city. I was his junior accountant. I found the discrepancies. I traced the missing millions. I gave that a moment to settle over the room. When I brought it to him, he made my options very clear. He told me he had the kind of friends who could make my young wife Beatrice disappear. He told me if I signed the paperwork, if I claimed responsibility for his fraud, she would be safe. I was 25 years old. I was terrified for my wife's life. So I signed. I sat in a cell for 4 years for crimes Arthur Pemberton committed. I did it so Beatrice would still be breathing when I got out. And while I served that time, Arthur Pemberton built a billion-dollar empire on money he stole from working people. I turned to the next page, a bank transfer record. Shaiti Kuntsur. This is the payment Arthur made when I was released, I said. Hush money, $2 million. He assumed he was purchasing my permanent silence. He assumed the money would erode my resolve. Instead, I put every dollar into building a firm whose sole purpose was hunting down men built in his exact mold. I looked directly into the lens. Lacey Pemberton has been living her entire life on money her father took from the workers of this city. The car she drives, the clothes on her back paid for with stolen pensions. And now she attempted to deploy my sacrifice as a weapon against me. I closed the binder. I kept this buried for 40 years to shield the people caught in the wreckage, I said. Lacey forced it into the light. She wanted the world to know I was a criminal. Now you all know I was a criminal so that her father could die celebrated. The truth has a long memory. The interview wrapped. The studio was silent in a way that felt almost sacred. Then every device I carried began ringing at once. I stood and walked off the set. Garrett was by the exit with his tablet raised. "You'll want to see the feed, sir," he said. I looked. The comments that had been tearing me apart minutes earlier had reversed completely. The hashtag Conrad the Hero was trending citywide. But what mattered more, Lacey's social media had turned into open warfare. People were excavating her old posts, her vacations, the jewelry, the lifestyle. They were drawing lines between her spending and her father's crimes. They were calling for restitution. They were calling her the daughter of a thief. "She won't be able to show herself in this city," Garrett said. "It's done." I nodded. I felt no satisfaction. It was like clearing a drain, necessary but nothing you celebrate. I climbed into the car. I was running on empty. All I wanted was to get home to Beatrice, to close this chapter and rest. Then the phone rang again. Not a journalist. Not someone offering support. Dorian. I stared at his name on the screen. What was left for him to say, his wife was finished. He had nothing. I answered. "It's over, Dorian," I said. "Don't call here again." He laughed, not the broken sound of a man who has lost. This was something else, high unhinged, like a wire pulled past its limit and snapping. "Did you catch the news, Dad?" he said. "Did you see how you took Lacey down?" "She took herself down." "Yeah, she did." Dorian agreed. "She is in the bathroom right now sobbing. Says her life is finished. Says she wants to end it." "That is not my concern, Dorian." "No," he said, "it isn't. But what's sitting right beside me that's very much yours." I went still. "What are you talking about?" "I told you I needed money, Dad." Dorian said, his voice dropping to something low and deliberate. "I told you how desperate things were, but you chose the cameras over your family. Just Dorian, stop rambling and tell me what you want." 10 million, Dorian said. "Bitcoin, 1 hour." I almost laughed. "You are out of your mind. You won't see a cent from me." "Not even for Eli." The blood drained from my body. Every sound in the car went muffled. Eli, my grandson, Dorian's son from his first marriage. The boy lived with his mother Petra on the other side of the city. 5 years old. The only person in this entire disaster who had done absolutely nothing wrong. "Say that again," I whispered. "I pulled him from school," Dorian said as though he were discussing the weather. "Told the teachers there was a family situation. Petra doesn't know yet. We're in the van, Dad, rolling." "You took your own son," I said, my voice fracturing into something between rage and disbelief. "A road trip," Dorian said. "Could be a permanent one depending on your generosity." Put him on, I said. Let me hear him. Go ahead, Dorian said to someone in the background. Grandpa. The voice was small, and it hit me like a fist to the chest. It was Eli. He sounded frightened and confused. Daddy is driving real fast. He says we're going to see the ocean. Eli, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. Listen carefully. Everything is going to be all right. I am going to take care of this. That's plenty, Dorian said, pulling the phone back. You heard him. Still breathing for now. Dorian, I kept my voice quiet and even. If you frighten that boy, if you put one scratch on him, 10 million. Dorian cut in. 60 minutes. After that, the van finds a bridge. I have nothing left, Dad. You burned it all down. So now I take the one thing you'd burn yourself down to protect. The call ended. I sat in the back of the car, phone pressed against my palm, the city sliding past the windows in smeared lights. The television studio, the interview, the trending hashtag, all of it meant absolutely nothing now. My son had crossed a line no one comes back from, and he had Eli on the other side of it. Garrett caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. Sir, where are we headed? I did not say home. I did not say the police precinct. The safe house, I said. The one with the equipment. Garrett's eyes held mine in the mirror for a moment. He had seen that look on my face before, not recently, but he remembered it. Colombia. Hunting men who had buried themselves deep. Yes, sir, he said, and did not ask another question. I looked down at the phone. 59 minutes. Dorian believed this was a negotiation. He thought leverage was something he understood. What he did not grasp was that the moment he put Eli in that van, he stopped being my son. He became a problem requiring a solution. And I have never failed to solve a problem. Beatrice was barely holding herself together. Both hands clamped to the kitchen counter, knuckles drained of color. She looked at me the way a person looks when the worst thing they ever imagined has just walked through the front door and sat down. Dorian has a child in that van, Conrad. She said, her breath coming in short pulls. He is unstable. Drugs, alcohol, something he could lose control of that vehicle. We need to call the police. We need the FBI. No police, I said, my voice cutting straight through her panic. You bring in sirens, you get a pursuit. A pursuit ends with that van wrapped around something. We handle this my way. I took her arm, firm but gentle, and steered her toward the pantry. I moved the heavy shelving unit that held her jarred preserves out from the wall. Behind it was a section of reinforced steel panel fitted flush and painted over to blend in. I pressed my palm to the biometric scanner. A green light pulsed. The wall exhaled a slow hydraulic sigh and swung inward to reveal a staircase descending into cool blue light. Beatrice stood at the edge of it and looked down into a part of my life she had never been shown. Conrad, she breathed. What is this? The reason we are both still standing, I said, and guided her down the metal steps. The room below was not a damp hole. It hummed with precision server racks, cooling fans, the soft electronic pulse of a facility that had been maintained and ready. Banks of monitors lined the far wall. The center of the room held a large table covered in maps, tactical layouts, equipment. Beatrice turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. You told me this was a wine cellar, she said. You said you were keeping vintage bottles down here. I lied, I said, settling in front of the main console and entering my access sequence. The screens came alive. Beatrice drifted toward a rack mounted to the side wall. It was not holding bottles. It was holding rifles, Kevlar vests, night vision equipment. Conrad. Her voice had gone fragile. Who exactly have you been all these years? You are an accountant. You audit businesses. I was never only an accountant, Beatrice. I said, my fingers working across the keyboard. I was a cleaner. I resolved situations for people who couldn't go to the authorities. Now I am going to resolve this one. The tracking software opened. The city map expanded across the screen. A single red beacon pulsed steadily. Beatrice leaned in. Is that Eli? Yes, I said. How is that possible? I swiveled to face her. You remember the watch I gave him for his 5th birthday? She nodded slowly. The one you said was too large for a child's wrist. The diving watch. I stripped the internals, I said. Replaced the movement with military-grade GPS and a microphone. 5-year battery. Waterproof, shockproof, and Dorian-proof. I pressed a key. Audio from the watch filled the room. Tires on asphalt. Heavy metal blaring from a radio. And underneath it, barely audible but unmistakable Eli crying quietly in the back seat. Shut up. Dorian's voice cracked through the speaker. Stop it right now, or I will give you a real reason to cry. Beatrice turned away, one hand pressed over her mouth to hold back the sound she was trying not to make. I focused on the map. The red dot had gone still. They were at the old rail yard down by the river, a gutted stretch of rusted containers and derelict warehouses, the kind of place that appears on no one's radar. Ideal for a drop-off. Equally ideal for something worse. I lifted the secure handset from the console. Not 911, a number that exists in no directory. Identify. A voice answered, no pleasantry, just instant readiness. And Whitaker authorization Alpha 9. Go ahead, sir. I need the cleaners, I said. Full tactical. Hostage situation. Target is a 5-year-old male. Hostiles are armed and unpredictable. Location is rail yard sector 4. Rolling, the voice said. 6 minutes. The line closed. I crossed to the weapon rack. I pulled down a tactical vest and cinched it over my cardigan. I dropped the magazine from my sidearm, checked it, seated it again. I clipped a flashbang to my belt. Conrad, Beatrice said, her grip closing around my arm. You are 70 years old. You cannot go out into that. Let your men do what you trained them for. I looked at her. I brought my hand to her cheek. He is my blood, Beatrice, I said. And Dorian is my mistake. Both of those things mean this ends with me. I pressed my lips to her forehead. Lock the door the moment I'm up the stairs, I told her. You do not open it for anyone except me or Garrett. I climbed back up and stepped out into the night. I was not a 70-year-old man with aching joints. I was a targeting system with a single point of aim, my son. The rail yard at that hour smelled of rust and diesel. My black SUV rolled to a silent stop behind a row of stacked containers. Garrett cut the headlights. 3 dark vans drew up alongside us. Their side doors slid open, and 12 men stepped onto the gravel. Not young men. Men in their 40s and 50s, veterans, every one of them. Men the system had used up and discarded. I had covered surgeries, settled mortgages, stood beside them when no one else would. Their loyalty was absolute and unconditional. The team leader moved to my window. His face carried a scar along the jaw that told its own story. Ghost. Sir, he said, we have thermal on the warehouse. 4 signatures. 1 small stationary in the far corner. 3 larger ones moving a patrol pattern. Dorian brought hired muscle. I opened the door and stepped out. He doesn't have friends, I said. So he scraped up whatever he could find locally. Amateur labor. Rules of engagement, Ghost asked. I checked my weapon one final time. The boy comes out first. That is the only priority that matters. The hired hands are expendable. But Dorian, I looked Ghost in the eye. I want him breathing. I want him standing in front of me when it's over. I want him to see my face when everything he gambled on collapses. Ghost gave a single nod, a hand signal to the team. They disappeared into the shadows between the containers, no sound, no hesitation, like smoke finding the gaps in a wall. I moved with them. My knees ached with every step. My breathing was shallow, but my hands didn't shake. We moved up to the warehouse's main sliding door, rusted solid, but off to the side was a smaller service entrance, barely pulled shut. Ghost raised a fist, then spread 3 fingers. 2. 1. He hit the door. The team poured through. I came in right behind Garrett, his body angled in front of mine like a shield. The warehouse swallowed us in darkness. At its center, beneath a single bare bulb swinging overhead, sat a white van. Eli was curled up on the floor beside it, knees drawn tight against his chest. 3 men stood over him in a loose circle, cigarettes dangling from their lips. Cheap muscle, the kind you can read at a glance, leather jackets, ink crawling up their necks. Dorian was moving in tight circles, screaming into his phone. "Where is the money?" he was yelling. "It has been an hour." One of the thugs caught sight of us. Up came a shotgun. "Ta! Yo, we got company!" he barked. He never got another word out. Ghost put him down with a single non-lethal round to the chest, a beanbag slug that landed like a sledgehammer blow. The man crumpled, fighting for air. The other 2 lunged for their weapons. "Flash out!" Garrett bellowed, spinning a canister into the middle of the room. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my palms over my ears. Bang! A wall of white light detonated through the warehouse, followed by a concussive blast that rattled your teeth. When my eyes opened, both thugs were writhing on the concrete, clawing at their faces, blinded, deafened, lost. My team was on them in seconds, zip ties on their wrists, weapons kicked clear. Dorian was staggering in circles, pistol sweeping the air at nothing. "I can't see," he screamed. "I can't see." Ghost stepped in behind him and buckled his knee from the back. Dorian went down hard. Ghost sent the gun skidding across the floor. I didn't spare Dorian a glance. I walked straight through the drifting smoke toward the small shape huddled on the ground. Eli looked up. His eyes were enormous, flooded with terror. Every part of him was trembling. "Grandpa," he whispered. I unholstered my weapon and set it aside. I lowered myself to both knees on that filthy concrete floor and opened my arms wide. "I'm here, Eli," I said. "Grandpa is here." He launched himself into me, burying his face hard against my chest. He smelled like fear and innocence. I pulled him close and felt his little heart hammering against my ribs like a bird beating its wings inside a trap. "It's okay," I murmured, my hand moving through his hair. "The bad men are gone. You're safe." I got to my feet with him in my arms, the adrenaline lending me the strength of someone half my age. "Take him to the car," I told Garrett. "Get him ice cream. Get him whatever he wants. Just get him out of here." Garrett gave one firm nod and gathered Eli gently from my arms. "I want to go home." Eli cried, his hands reaching back toward me. "You are going home, son," I told him. "And Garrett is going to take you to Grandma. I'll be right behind you." I watched Garrett carry my grandson out through that door. Then I turned back into the room. The smoke was thinning. The 3 thugs were propped against the wall, groaning. Dorian was on his knees in the center of it all. His vision was coming back. His eyes found me. They held no remorse. They burned with rage. "You ruined everything," he said, spitting blood from where he'd bitten through his lip when he fell. "You ruined my life." I crossed the floor to him. I looked down at the son I had raised, the son I had shielded. "I didn't ruin your life, Dorian. I said, my voice carrying flat and cold through the empty warehouse. I just stopped paying for it. He let out a laugh, wet and ugly. You think this is over? He sneered. You think you can just have me arrested? I know things, Dad. I know about the shell companies. I know about the offshore accounts. If I go down, I'm dragging your empire with me. I nodded toward Ghost. Bring him to the chair, I said, pointing to a rusted old chair sitting in the corner. Dorian's eyes snapped wide. What are you doing? He stammered. The police, you have to call the police. I'm not calling the police yet, I said, moving toward him. You wanted to play gangster Dorian. You wanted to snatch a child and issue demands. Well, welcome to the big leagues. And in the big leagues, we don't call anyone until the mess is sorted. Ghost hauled Dorian to the chair, and Zip tied his wrists to the back rail. I grabbed a crate and planted myself directly in front of him, knee to knee. Now, I said, leaning in. Let's talk about those contracts you signed in my name, because before I hand you to the FBI, I need to know exactly how deep a hole you've dug. Dorian swallowed. He swept his eyes across the hard faces of the veterans ringing him. Then he looked at me, and something shifted. For the first time that night, the realization landed. His father was not the victim in this room. His father was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Start talking, son, I said, or we'll be here a very long time. The rusted chair groaned as Dorian shifted, fighting for any relief from the zip ties biting into his wrists. His lip was puffy and crusted with dried blood, but his eyes burned with a feverish, manic gleam. He stared at me, and then he laughed. It was a broken, rattling sound that bounced off the corrugated steel overhead. Don't you think this is it? He wheezed, spitting a red glob onto the concrete. You think tying me to a chair solves anything? You have no idea what I've done, Dad. You have no idea what I've signed. I sat on the crate across from him, palms resting on my knees, watching him with the same patience I'd spent 40 years building the kind that comes from unraveling complex financial knots one thread at a time. Then enlighten me, Dorian, I said. He grinned, showing red-stained teeth. I leveraged the company Whitaker Holdings. Last week I signed a merger agreement with a development firm in Dubai. I put up the entire portfolio as collateral. If I don't show up for the closing tomorrow, the deal collapses. The penalties alone will wipe you out. He strained forward as far as the restraints allowed, eyes wide with triumph. I signed everything in your name, he hissed. I have your power of attorney, remember, forged it 3 years ago. If I go to prison, you go to the poorhouse. I burned the ship, Dad. If I sink, you sink right beside me. So you're going to cut these ties. You're going to hand me the money, and you're going to thank me for leaving your legacy intact. I held his stare. I looked at the arrogance still blazing in him even after a tactical takedown. He genuinely believed he was the sharpest mind in that room. He genuinely believed he held the detonator. Is that all? I asked. Dorian blinked, thrown by the absence of panic on my face. Is that all, Dad? I just told you I put a $50 million lien on your company? I signed promissory notes. I took out loans against the equity of the headquarters. I have buried you under so much paper you will never dig free. You need me to unwind this. I rose slowly from the crate. I walked to the small table where Ghost had set down my leather satchel. I lifted the flap and drew out a single thin blue folder. I carried it back to Dorian and held it up between us. You see this, Dorian, I said. What is that? He sneered. My personnel file. No, I said. This is the incorporation document for Whitaker Holdings, LLC, the company you have been CEO of for 5 years. So what? He said. I opened the folder, read the second paragraph. I said, holding it level with his face. Dorian squinted at the page. It says it's a limited liability company. Keep reading, I said. His eyes tracked the legal language. Then they stopped. His brow pulled together. Sole asset holding none. He read slowly. Purpose, educational simulation, and non-equity management. He looked up at me. I don't understand. We have assets. We have the building. We have the fleet. We have the accounts. I shut the folder with a clean, sharp snap. No, Dorian, I said. We don't. I pulled the stool close and sat directly in front of him, knee to knee, once more. You see, son, when I handed you the keys, I already knew you weren't ready. I knew you were greedy. I knew you were lazy. So I didn't give you the kingdom. I gave you a sandbox. Dorian shook his head. But the office, the employees. The office is leased by my personal trust, I said. The employees are paid through a separate payroll company I own personally. Whitaker Holdings, the company you just leveraged to the hilt, owns absolutely nothing. It is a shell company, Dorian. It is a ghost. 0 assets, 0 equity, 0 value. The color drained from Dorian's face. But the loans, the contracts, I signed them. Yes, I said. You did. And since Whitaker Holdings carries no collateral to back those loans, do you know who's left holding the debt? He stared at me, his breathing gone shallow. The signatory, I said, leveling a finger at his chest. You. Dorian shook his head hard. No, I signed as CEO. The corporate veil protects me. I laughed. It was a cold sound. The corporate veil only holds if the corporation is solvent, Dorian. But here's the part that really stings. Because you forged my signature on the power of attorney, which I can establish with forensic handwriting analysis, you committed fraud. Fraud tears the corporate veil apart instantly. Those loans you pulled, that merger penalty, the $50 million in debt. None of it touches me. None of it touches Whitaker Holdings. It lands on you. Personally. Dorian began to hyperventilate. No, that's impossible. It's accounting 101, I said without mercy. You didn't bankrupt me, Dorian. You bankrupted yourself. You owe $50 million to banks and developers, and you don't have a dime to show for it. You're not a businessman. You're just a man with a very expensive signature and no means to honor it. Dorian sagged in the chair. The fight poured out of him all at once, leaving nothing but a hollow, terrified shell. I'm ruined, he whispered. I stood and turned my back on him, facing the dark corners of the warehouse. Oh, son, I said. Being ruined by the banks is the least of what's coming for you. Banks sue you. Banks garnish your wages. Banks work within the law. I turned back around. But you didn't just borrow from banks, did you? Dorian's head snapped up. Raw, primal fear filled his eyes. I know about the bridge loans, Dorian, I said, dropping my voice to something quiet and dangerous. I went through your personal ledger. When the banks cut you off, you went to the street. You borrowed $2 million from the Vipers. Dorian started pulling at the zip ties. Dad, wait. The Vipers are not bankers, I went on. They don't send demand letters. They send men with baseball bats and blowtorches. They don't care about shell companies. They care about their money. And you told them you were good for it, because your father was Conrad Whitaker. I took out my phone. The screen lit up the dim room. I just sent a text message, I said, turning the screen toward him. Dorian squinted at it. Who did you text? A man named Sergei, I said. He handles collections for the Vipers, from what I understand. I sent him a GPS pin. Dorian's scream tore through the warehouse. "No, Dad, no, you can't do that. They'll kill me. They'll cut me into pieces." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "You threatened my wife," I said. "You kidnapped my grandson. You put a gun in my face. You tried to tear my life apart. Did you honestly expect me to shield you from yours? Please." Dorian begged, tears cutting through the blood and grime on his face. "Please, Dad. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. I'll take the prison time. Call the police. Please just call the police. Don't leave me for them." I glanced at my watch. "Sergey runs a tight operation," I said. "He's usually about 10 minutes out." I looked over at Ghost and the rest of the team. "Pack it up," I said. "We're done here." "Wait!" Dorian shrieked, thrashing so violently the chair legs scraped across the concrete. "You can't leave me here. You can't hand me to them. I'm your son." I paused at the heavy metal door. I looked back at him one final time. "My son died a long time ago," I said. "You're just a bad investment that finally came due." We walked out into the cool night. The heavy door slammed behind us, sealing Dorian inside with his darkness. Ghost fell into step beside me as we crossed to the SUV. "Are the Vipers actually coming, sir?" he asked. I nodded. "They're coming," but I hadn't told Ghost the full picture. Yes, I had sent the location to the Vipers, but 5 minutes before that, I'd sent the same location to someone else. I'd sent it to the FBI. I wanted Dorian to feel the terror of the mob bearing down on him. I wanted him sweating and screaming and begging for the police. But I didn't want him dead. Death was too easy. I wanted him in a federal cell for the next 20 years, staring at the walls and thinking about the empire he threw away. I climbed into the car. "Let's go," I said. As we pulled out, I caught headlights in the distance, 2 separate convoys approaching the warehouse from opposite directions. The collision was inevitable, and Dorian was sitting right in the center of it. The headlights that swept through the darkness were blinding. Dorian squeezed his eyes shut and folded himself into a fetal position against the rusted chair. He was sobbing. He was begging. He was convinced the Vipers had arrived with their blowtorches and their pliers to collect the $2 million he didn't have. He screamed for mercy. He screamed that he'd pay them double if they let him walk out alive. He screamed that every bit of this was my fault. I stood beside my SUV and watched him. I watched the son I had raised reduce himself to a puddle of pure cowardice. It was a pitiful sight. But the men stepping out of those vehicles weren't wearing leather jackets. They wore windbreakers with 3 bold yellow letters across the back. FBI. I hadn't called the Vipers to destroy him. I'd called the Vipers to break him, and I'd called the FBI to finish him. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." My team, the cleaners, had already holstered. They stepped back with their hands in plain sight, professionals right to the end. They knew how this worked. Dorian opened his eyes. He blinked against the hard glare of tactical flashlights. He saw the badges. He saw the federal warrants. "It's the feds," he whispered. His voice carried a strange mixture of relief and dread. He wasn't going to die tonight, but his life as a free man was finished. Agent Reeves, the lead investigator on the RICO case I had been quietly feeding evidence to for 6 months, walked up to Dorian. He didn't look impressed. "Dorian Whitaker," Agent Reeves said, cutting the zip ties only to replace them with steel handcuffs. "You are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and the kidnapping of a minor across state lines. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Dorian looked straight at me. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. "You set me up," he hissed. "You called them." "Oh, I didn't set you up, Dorian. I said, my voice carrying over the wind, cutting off the water. I just turned on the lights. You're the one who built the cockroach's nest. They hauled him to the back of a federal sedan. He fought them the whole way, kicking, screaming about his rights, about his lawyer, about his father being the real criminal. It was pointless. The agents had been watching him for weeks off the dossier I'd handed them. They knew exactly what they were dealing with. I watched the taillights disappear into the dark. Ghost came and stood beside me. That's a hard thing to do, sir," he said quietly. "Sending your own blood to a cage." "It's the only way to save him from himself, Ghost," I replied. "In prison, he can't borrow money from the mob. In prison, he can't hurt his mother. It's a rescue mission. It just doesn't feel like one." I got into the car. "Take me to the federal building," I told Garrett. "I want to be there when they start asking questions." The interrogation room was cold. It smelled of stale coffee and nervous sweat. I stood behind the two-way mirror alongside Calloway, my attorney. We watched Dorian together. He was at the metal table, still in his torn suit, looking like a man who had lost everything and knew it. He was not staying silent. He was talking a mile a minute. "It was my father," Dorian told the agents, his eyes frantic and wide. "Conrad Whitaker, he's the mastermind. I was just a figurehead. He used me to sign the papers. He used me to move the money. He's the one you want. He has offshore accounts in Panama. He has shell companies. I'll testify. I can give you everything, just cut me a deal." Agent Reeves glanced at his partner. Neither of them wrote a word down. They just let him run. "He forced me to take my son." Dorian lied, the words spilling out in a torrent. "He said if I didn't bring Eli to him, he'd cut me off completely. He's a monster. He's controlling. He engineered this whole thing to frame me because I found out about his tax evasion. I stood behind that glass and listened to my son try to bury me. I listened to him manufacture crimes I'd never touched in order to bury the ones he'd committed himself. It didn't hurt anymore. The part of me that could still be wounded by him had died the moment he raised his hand to Beatrice. Now I was simply an accountant watching an audit collapse in real time. "Ready?" Calloway asked, gripping a heavy steel briefcase at his side. "Ready," I said. We pushed through the door. Dorian stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked on us. "What is he doing here?" Dorian shouted, launching to his feet. "I'm giving you evidence on him. Arrest him." "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker," Agent Reeves ordered. Dorian dropped back into the chair chest, heaving. Calloway set the steel briefcase down on the table with a solid, weighty thud. Black reinforced, sealed with a biometric pad. "What is that?" Dorian asked, his voice unsteady. "This," Calloway said, pressing his thumb to the scanner, "is your life, Dorian. Or rather, the life you worked so hard to bury." The case hissed open. Inside sat 10 hard drives, each one neatly labeled by year, 2013 to 2023. "We call this the black box," I said, moving closer to the table. Dorian stared at the drives. Then he stared at me. "You see, son," I went on. "When you started coming to me for money 10 years ago, I had a feeling. Call it a father's intuition, or call it 40 years of catching people who thought they were smarter than me. So I did what I've always done best. I started a file. I lifted the drive labeled 2018. This one holds audio recordings of every call you made from the company phone I paid for," I said. "Including the calls to the bookies, including the calls to the drug dealers, including the call where you told Lacey you hoped I'd have a heart attack so you could get your hands on the trust fund early." The color drained from Dorian's face. That's illegal. You can't record me. It was a company phone." "Dorian," Calloway cut in, his tone smooth and unhurried. "The user agreement you signed without reading as usual clearly states that all communications are subject to monitoring for quality assurance. We have quality assured you all the way to a felony conviction." I set the drive back and lifted a thick binder of bank statements. "And this," I said, opening it to a page flagged with red tape, "is the forensic audit of your personal accounts. It traces every transfer from the shell company into your private crypto wallet. It shows the payments to the Vipers. It shows the forgery of my signature on the loan documents." I leaned across the table toward him. "I didn't just watch you drown, Dorian," I said quietly. "I documented every inch the water rose, every lie, every theft, every betrayal. I kept it all. I was waiting for you to turn yourself around. I was waiting for you to grow up," I said. "Instead, you tried to kill your mother." Dorian sank back in his chair. He stared at the mountain of evidence. He looked at the agents who were no longer watching him like a witness, but circling him like prey. "You knew," Dorian breathed. "You knew the whole time." "I knew everything." "Then why did you let me go this far?" "Because you had to choose your own fate," I said. "And you chose greed." Dorian lowered his head to the table and began to weep. It was the sound of a man with no one left to blame. Agent Reeves got to his feet. "We have more than enough. Federal sentencing guidelines don't have much mercy for money laundering, especially when kidnapping is attached. We're looking at 20 years minimum." Dorian's head snapped up. "Wait, I can give you someone else. Lacey. She pushed me into all of this. She spent the money and she is running right now. She has a flight tonight to Zurich. She took Mom's jewelry from the safe while you were at the TV station. The emeralds, the vintage diamonds. She's at O'Hare right now." I looked over at Calloway. Beatrice's heirlooms, the pieces I had placed around her neck on our anniversaries. Lacey had helped herself while we were out defending our name. "Call the Port Authority," I told Agent Reeves. "Already on it," he said, speaking into his radio. I looked at Dorian one last time. "You just handed your wife over to prison to shave 5 years off your own sentence." "She's not my wife," Dorian snapped. "She's an accomplice. And she is not going to spend my money while I rot in a cell." I turned and walked out. The rot inside him ran too deep to look at any longer. We sat in the SUV outside the international terminal, watching the live feed from airport security cameras on Calloway's tablet. Lacey was in the first-class lounge, champagne in hand, trench coat and sunglasses, the perfect portrait of a grieving woman slipping away from tragedy. She thought she had made it. She thought she was walking away with the last laugh. She never saw the agents until they were standing right over her. 2 female agents approached her table. Lacey shot to her feet, indignant. I could read her lips through the grainy footage. "Do you know who I am?" Then the agents unzipped her carry-on and upended a velvet pouch onto the table. Even through the security camera, the brilliance was unmistakable. Beatrice's emerald necklace, the diamond brooch, the pearls from our wedding day. Lacey ran. She actually tried to run in heels across the polished floor. They had her before she covered 3 steps. The champagne glass exploded on the floor. They pinned her arms behind her back while she screamed at the ceiling. Calloway closed the tablet. "Grand larceny, possession of stolen goods, attempting to flee the jurisdiction. She's looking at 10 years plus deportation." I leaned back and closed my eyes. It was over. "Take me home, Garrett," I said. The courthouse was a circus. The defense attorneys had done an expert job of poisoning the ground before a single juror was seated. They painted me as a domineering patriarch, a bitter old man who couldn't stomach his son's marriage. They constructed a narrative of toxic parenting and wielded wealth. They called me a tyrant who used money as a chain. Inside the courtroom, the defense attorney, a man named Bexley, expensive and theatrical, never once mentioned the kidnapping or the fraud in his opening statement. He talked about emotional abuse. What you are truly witnessing is a tragedy of control, Bexley told the jury. Conrad Whitaker used his wealth as a weapon. When his son tried to break free, when he tried to carve out a life with the woman he loved, Conrad Whitaker crushed him. I watched the jury. Heads were nodding. Everyone has a soft spot for an underdog story, and Bexley was packaging Dorian as the ultimate underdog. Across the courtroom, Dorian gave me a small, mournful smile, the smile of a man who believes he's found a gap in the fence. He thought he could charm his way clear of a felony. He thought he could work 12 strangers the same way he had worked his mother for 40 years. He had forgotten one thing. I am an accountant. And accountants don't rely on charm. We rely on receipts. When the prosecutor called my name, I rose, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the witness stand. Bexley came out hard on cross-examination. Is it true that you controlled every dimension of your son's life? You decided where he lived, what he drove, where he worked. I did not control his life. I said, keeping my voice level. I financed it. You owned him. You engineered a state of arrested development. I shifted my eyes to the jury and reached into my briefcase. I drew out a thick, leather-bound ledger, old, heavy, every page dense with my handwriting. Your Honor, I would like to submit this ledger into evidence. Exhibit G. I opened the book and began reading. No flourish, no emotion, just numbers. Numbers don't lie. 2003 freshman year at Northwestern, tuition room board, $85,000. Plus a $20,000 settlement to bury a plagiarism incident so he would not be expelled. Dorian shifted in his seat. 2007 graduation gift, a Porsche 911, $90,000. Totaled 3 months later driving under the influence. Legal fees to keep it off his record, $50,000. Replacement vehicle, $60,000. The skeptical woman in the front row of the jury raised an eyebrow. 2011 seed money for his first startup, $2 million. Gone in 6 months. No receipts, no audit trail. Just gone. 2017 gambling debts settled with an organization in Las Vegas to prevent the removal of his kneecaps. $500,000. A gasp moved through the courtroom. 2021, a private settlement paid to a young woman who served as his personal assistant. The amount was $300,000. I kept reading. 20 minutes straight. Cars, vacations collapsed. Businesses, rehab, legal arrangements, jewelry. I reached the final entry. Total expenditure over 20 years, I said, looking up from the page. $15,422,000. I closed the book. The sound landed like a shot in the silent room. I did not control him, I said, turning to face the jury. I enabled him. I loved him so deeply that I absorbed every consequence he should have faced himself. My voice cracked for the first time. I don't regret the money. What I regret is what the money did. I regret that I spent $15 million turning my own son into a monster. And now I have to pay the emotional price of locking that monster in a cage before he hurts anyone else. Bexley had lost the room entirely. He tried to pivot toward emotional support versus financial support, but nobody was listening. The jury was no longer looking at Dorian as a victim. They were looking at him as a parasite. But Bexley had one card left. "You claim self-defense inside your own home," he said, hardening his voice. "But all we have is your word and the word of your hired soldiers." "No," I said. "We have more than that." The prosecutor moved to introduce Exhibit H security footage from the Whitaker dining room on Thanksgiving night. Bexley objected immediately. The judge reviewed the submission, found it continuous and time-stamped, and ruled it admissible. The lights dropped. The screen descended. The footage played. The jury watched as Dorian screamed at us. They heard the raw entitlement in his voice. They heard Lacey's cruel laughter underneath it. And then they watched Beatrice, my wife, the woman who had spent her life caring for others, sitting in her chair, trembling, as Dorian loomed over her, pulled back his hand, and struck her. The sound of the slap cracked through the quiet courtroom like a thunderclap. The room recoiled as one. The skeptical woman in the front row covered her mouth. A man in the back row rose halfway out of his seat. Then they saw Lacey. They saw her clap. That was the end of it. Whatever sympathy Bexley had cultivated, whatever seeds of doubt he had planted, all of it evaporated in that single moment. They no longer saw a misunderstood son. They saw a man beating his elderly mother. They no longer saw a devoted wife. They saw a sociopath applauding the blow. I looked at Dorian. He had turned his face away from the screen, staring at his hands, the same hands that had struck the woman who brought him into this world. The lights came back up. "No further questions, Your Honor." I stepped down from the witness stand. I walked past the defense table without looking at either of them. I looked only at Beatrice sitting in the front row, crying without a sound. I went to her and took her hand in mine. "It's over, Beatrice," I whispered. "They saw. They know." Bexley made an attempt at a closing argument. It fell on stone. He was talking to a wall that had already made up its mind. The jury wouldn't meet Dorian's eyes as they filed back in. They were fixed on the door, ready to be done. And so was I. The jury wouldn't meet his eyes. They were fixed on the deliberation room door, ready to be done. Dorian knew it. He sank in his chair with his head in his hands. $15 million can buy many things, but it cannot buy back what those 12 people had already seen. He was finished, and he knew it. The gavel struck. Judge Wexford peered down at the defense table over his spectacles. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. Shakti-tontrum. The defendant, Dorian Whitaker, is hereby sentenced to 180 months in a federal correctional facility. The judge said, his voice flat and final. That is 15 years for money laundering, wire fraud, and kidnapping. There is no parole in the federal system. You will be 55 years old when you walk free. Dorian didn't scream. He didn't weep. He folded forward until his forehead rested on the mahogany table. It was the posture of a man who had finally watched his charm bounce back like a bad check. The judge shifted to Lacey. She was trembling so hard, the legs of her chair tapped against the floor. Lacey Pemberton, 120 months, 10 years. Upon completion, you will be immediately remanded to ICE for deportation to your country of origin. She let out a wail like a wounded animal. No, please. I am an American. You are a guest who violated the hospitality of this nation, the judge said, cutting across her. And you stole from the people who took you in. The financial hammer followed. Every asset they had touched was seized: the penthouse, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the cash in their pockets. All of it earmarked for creditors and victims. I watched the bailiffs move in. The steel cuffs clicked shut around Dorian's wrists. It was the same sound as the lock on my front door the night I threw them out. He looked back at me one final time. His eyes were empty. He was searching for his father, but his father wasn't standing there. Only the forensic accountant remained tallying the last entry in the ledger. A hand settled on my arm. Beatrice. The fear that had lived in her eyes for years was gone. "Let us go home, Conrad," she whispered. We walked out together. The city looked different through the car window. Cleaner somehow. But I knew there was one transaction still to come because arrogance doesn't die easily even behind bars. 3 weeks later, the phone rang on a Saturday afternoon. I was reading. Beatrice and Eli were in the garden planting strawberries. Restricted number. I picked up. "This is a collect call from a federal correctional facility. Will you accept the charges?" "Yes, Dad." Dorian's voice had changed higher, thinner, worn down to wire. "Dad, you have to help me. It's hell in here. They took my shoes. They cleaned out my commissary. I need protection money, $5,000. Just put it on my books. Please. If I don't pay by Monday, they're going to hurt me." I leaned back in my leather chair. My eyes went to his graduation photograph on my desk. I reached out and turned it face down. "I'm not putting money on your books, Dorian," I said. "Dad, please, they'll kill me." "I didn't say I wasn't paying them," I told him. "I said I'm not putting it on your books." The sobbing stopped. "What?" "I made a call this morning. I have contacts from my years auditing prison supply chains. I know who runs your cell block. I know Razor." Something like hope crept into his voice. "So you paid him off?" "No," I said. "I paid him to do a job. $2,000 a month to make sure you're up at 6 every morning, to make sure your bed is made, to make sure you report for every laundry shift. And if you try to hustle anyone, if you start carrying yourself like a big shot, he reminds you that you are nobody." "Dad, no. I hired a babysitter, Dorian, not a bodyguard. Razor is there to protect you from your own arrogance. He is going to teach you the one thing I failed to give you." "Oh, what's that?" "Humility. You are going to scrub floors. You are going to wash sheets soaked in other men's sweat for 15 cents an hour. And if you complain, Razor has instructions to explain your situation in terms you'll understand." "You're the devil!" Dorian screamed. "You're my father, and you threw me to the wolves." "I didn't throw you anywhere," I said. "I enrolled you in school. Learn to work or learn to bleed. That choice belongs to you." I put the phone down. I sat with the dial tone for a moment. It was a lonely sound, but it was a necessary one. I carried the phone to the kitchen and set it in the trash can. Calloway was at the table with documents spread before him. He watched me drop the phone in the bin without a word. "Change the number," I said. "Keep it unlisted. Give it only to family." He made a note. "And the will?" I sat down and picked up the pen, a heavy fountain pen, a gift from Beatrice. The document before me was the last will and testament of Conrad Whitaker. "Clause 4, Calloway read aloud. "Regarding the beneficiary, Dorian Whitaker." "Delete it," I said. "Not even a trust for rehabilitation." I looked out the window. Eli was chasing a butterfly across the garden while Beatrice watched him, her spirit lighter than I'd seen it in years. "He has already received his inheritance," I said. "He spent it on 15 years of bad decisions." I wrote a new name. "Eli Whitaker gets the trust, not a dollar of it, until he turns 30. Only if he finishes college and holds a job for 5 years. I signed my name, Conrad Whitaker. The signature was strong, steady, and clear. I stepped out the back door. The air was crisp. Eli looked up and handed me a trowel, his hands caked with soil. "This is how you do it, Grandpa," he said. I smiled. "Yes, I said. You dig a hole, you put in the work, and you watch it grow. 5 years later, I sat on the aft deck of a yacht in the Mediterranean. The boat was named The Reckoning, a quiet inside joke between me and Callaway. Below 10-year-old Eli worked a fishing rod at the rail. Reel it in slow, I called down. Don't fight the line. Let the fish do the work. Yes, Grandpa. He was on the honor roll at his school in Switzerland. He spoke 3 languages. He earned his allowance polishing deck brass. He wasn't being raised with a silver spoon. He was being raised with a compass. Beatrice came out from the cabin in a white linen dress. She looked younger than she had in years. The shadow Dorian had thrown over her life had finally moved on, letting the light pour back in. She settled beside me and rested a hand on my knee. It feels like another lifetime, she said. Nike. It was another lifetime, I said. That was a life where we walked on eggshells. This is the life we earned. I opened Callaway's monthly report on my tablet. The first section, Inmate 784-42054. Dorian had been transferred to a medium security facility in Indiana. Kitchen assignment. 0400 hours report to mess hall. Scrape trays, wash pots, scrub floors. Wage 12 cents an hour. The man who wore a $2,800 suit and expected 5-star treatment everywhere was now standing in steam and grease scraping half-eaten food off plastic trays. He had stopped reaching out 3 years back once he understood I'd blocked the number. The prison chaplain sent a note saying Dorian was finding religion. I didn't respond. Men like Dorian discover God once every other option has dried up. That's not faith. That's a hustle. The second section, Lacey Pemberton. Deported to a small nation in Eastern Europe she hadn't set foot in since childhood. No money, no connections. Her criminal record blocked her from visas elsewhere. Callaway's investigator had taken a photograph of a woman in a worn apron and sensible shoes, standing outside a dim bar, smoking a cigarette with her eyes fixed on the ground. Working for tips, I studied the photo. I felt no joy, no gloating. What I felt was cold, settled balance. The scales had swung violently for years. Now they were level. Gravity had done what gravity always does. Beatrice leaned over. She saw the photo. She read the update. Then she looked at me. Conrad, she said softly. Do you ever feel sad? Do you ever have regrets? I switched off the tablet. Imagine a leg gone infected, I said. Gangrene. The rot is spreading, killing you by degrees. The doctor says the limb has to come off. I paused. Down on the deck, Eli had hooked something and was laughing. Cutting it off hurts. It leaves a scar, a phantom ache where that limb once was. You miss it. You remember when it was whole. But if you keep it, the rot takes everything. I tightened my fingers around hers. I don't feel sad, Beatrice. I feel light the way a man feels when he's come through a fever and the heat finally breaks. If Dorian were here, Eli would be a pawn. He would be leverage. He would be shaped into something crooked. Now he has a real future. That is not something to grieve. That is something to be grateful for. She nodded and rested her head on my shoulder. You are a good man, Conrad. I am a necessary man. I corrected gently. My phone buzzed. Priority notification from the bank in Zurich. Quarterly dividends from the hotel conglomerate, $50 million US. Since I'd removed Dorian's shell company, since we'd stopped hemorrhaging cash to paper over his disasters, the empire had doubled in value. I looked at the number for a moment. Then I pressed the power button until the screen went dark. Who is it? Beatrice asked, eyes closed against the sun. Spam, I said. I slipped the phone into my pocket and extended my hand to my wife. Down below, Eli was hollering he'd pulled something up in the net. Come on, Beatrice, I said. Let's go see if it's big enough to eat tonight. She smiled and took my hand. I was 75 years old. I had lost a son not to death, but to the choices he made and the man he chose to become. I had lost years I will never get back. But God does not waste suffering, and when his timing finally evened things out, what was left standing was worth every hard day in between. I spent 40 years believing that providing for my family meant standing between them and the world. I was wrong. Real love isn't about handing your children everything they reach for. It's about giving them the values they need to stand on their own once you're gone. Money is paper. Character is iron. That is the only lesson that matters. Not with noise. Not with celebration. Just a quiet deck, a setting sun, and my wife's hand in mine. That is what winning actually looks like.